You're listening to the Sass podcast. I'm your host, Christy Rocha, also known as Sass. I identify as a woman, a wife, and a mother. That should tell you a lot already. And over the last few years, I've learned the value of talk therapy. I have seen how my inner work not only enhances my own well-being, but also my marriage, my parenting, my relationships. And in fact, you wouldn't be hearing this right now if it weren't for the work I've done. My mission is to debunk the misconceptions and stigmas around what therapy is and who it's for. Let's normalize working on our mental health and seeking help when needed. We've all heard of self-care, self-help, and self-love, but do you often wonder how to actually make it all happen? I do. You'll hear strategy-based conversations with professionals, as well as inspiring and validating stories from women who are just like you and me. Think of this podcast as the weekly therapy sessions you didn't know you needed, with a dash of sass, a lot of vulnerability, and me, relentlessly asking, but how?
Hello. Welcome back to another episode of Sass Says. I promised I'd be back with interviews, and here we are. Today, I'm very happy to be joined by Dr. Samara Toussaint to talk about her journey and how she helps her clients overcome their struggles with a more comprehensive approach. Dr. T is an experienced school psychologist with a demonstrated history of working in the education system. She's skilled in crisis intervention, psychological assessment, applied behavioral analysis, interventions, and child development. Today, she will be sharing with us how she got started in this field and how to balance mental health and religion, including her personal experience growing up in a primarily Haitian and religious community. We discuss the impact of the Haitian earthquake on women's mental health and the quote-unquote strong Black woman identity. We also discuss Dr. T's growth method. You're going to want to learn all about that. Let's listen in, and as always, please stay tuned after for my final thoughts. Hey, Dr. T. So nice to meet you. Thank you for being here with me today.
Yeah, thank you so much for having me, Christy.
I'm looking forward to learning more about you. With that in mind, why don't you start by just sharing a little bit about why you got into this work, why you became a counselor, therapist, and what's your why?
Oh my goodness. I guess we'll start from the beginning. I actually wanted to be a kindergarten teacher. And what changed me was like when I worked in the school system, because my mother worked in an after school program, and I just saw like the great need, like kids were struggling
Mm.
with their work, but not necessarily because of academics. It could have been because of their behaviors. And then I'm also Haitian Caribbean, so I saw like a lot of parents just weren't understanding what teachers meant by certain mental health disorders. So it
Mm.
just piqued my interest because I was like, I see my community is not really understanding mental health and how it's impacting their children. And from there, I was like, let's see what I can do in this mental health field.
Yeah. Okay, cool. So so the community that you're talking about was a community that you were part of professionally, or is this the same community that you grew up in?
That I grew up in, yeah.
Okay.
I grew up in a predominantly Haitian town.
Okay. And you know, I talked about this recently on the show with Dr. Quincee. She was talking about different, but she was talking about religious trauma, and
Mhm.
she had a similar some statement in sort of saying that there was a lack of understanding in relation to the religious aspect. Is that what we're talking about here?
Yeah, absolutely. I think that which is fine. There's a reliance on religion to cope, which is a coping skill, which is nothing wrong with that. But
Mhm.
then there's also the over reliance and that thinking that everything will work out, but we're also going to dismiss therapy and other mental health treatments because I have religion. And
Yeah.
I think that's where there's a lot of trauma that comes in because children actually really need the help and they're being denied the help because they're just saying we're going to pray about it.
Mm.
And then certain things, certain illnesses, certain concerns might continue and worsen because of the lack of help, the lack of resources.
Yeah. So, in your view, where is the balance? Where is the line between sort of like what is beneficial as far as preying on it and then actually seeking professional help? I don't know. I don't know that I fully understand my own question, but I think that it's
No,
hard.
I
No, go
absolutely
ahead.
get
Go ahead.
I absolutely get your question because it comes up a lot. But I can give an example
Sure.
because thankfully I got to work when I was working in the schools. I got to work with amazing parents. And I'll never forget this one parent that I was working with, and she was very religious. And the psychologist before him was just like, she's only gonna pray about it. She's not gonna do anything about his diagnosis because he had autism.
Mm,
And she was like, she won't do it because when it was assigned to me, I was just like, well, I'm going to say that look, God created your children, your child. He created me to help your child. You are the expert on your child, and
mm,
God is the expert on all of us. But He also created me to help your child get through this. So yes, we can pray about it to help, with relief, but we also have to take action. So
yeah.
there's a bit of both. It's just like, yes, we're going to pray for relief to cope, but we're also going to take action so that we can better help your child.
Yeah. That's amazing perspective. I've not heard anyone on the show yet share it that way. That, I imagine that mom was incredibly comforted by hearing that
Yeah,
you were created to help her kid. I mean, it's true, right? I mean,
yeah.
I don't know. Yeah.
She was actually she was taken aback. She was like, whoa. It's like,
Yeah.
and then from there, we were able to get him the treatment that he needed because all she just needed was confirmation. I think we're so easy to dismiss, especially in my field, to be like, oh my gosh, like pray about it. Like that's ridiculous. Like get your kid the help, get your kid the medication. But some parents just aren't there yet. And I think because I grew up in a community where people weren't there yet and
Hmm.
they need someone to hold their hand through it, there's nothing wrong with taking your time and saying you can do both.
Hmm. Yeah. Yeah. And I have to say, I grew up going to church, going to Catholic school all through even high
Yeah.
school, and then I went to a Jesuit college and the whole thing. And I've gotten away from religion mainly because of some of the things socially that happen within the church that just didn't feel right. And I don't know, I just have not, I can only work on so much at a time. And that aspect of my life has just taken a back seat to the other things that have happened, COVID, kids, like,
Hmm.
whatever. Anyway, um, but I have to say, in the last few years of working with a therapist and really deep diving my own mental health, I definitely would have instinctually been on the train of that's ridiculous. You can't just pray it away. And so to hear your perspective on that it's hitting me in a way that I wouldn't have expected because I don't place a lot of weight in religion at this point in my life.
Hmm.
And so but to hear that is like, whoa, okay, there is a way to marry the two, to blend the two, and that's
Right.
really interesting. How do you continue to do that for yourself if you do?
Well, I think that over the course of my years, especially my career, I feel like I've grown my religious beliefs to include like ancestral spirituality,
Mhm.
chakras, and stuff like that. I use crystals. So I think that I've been able to expand just by learning about different religions and just being able to use spirituality in a way that heals me. I also understand where you're coming from because I do feel like sometimes aspects of the church can be hypocritical and they can be very traumatic. And I know, and I've also worked with a few of my clients in my private practice who have felt the weight of that trauma, who have felt the weight of the judgment, and they don't ever want to return. So
Mm,
I definitely want to acknowledge that there are times where people can use religion in a way that traumatizes others. And that's also happened to me personally when I was a child. So I think that I always tell people that I use spirituality in a way that I always say helps me. If it doesn't make me feel comfortable, I have to leave. I have to kind of walk away from it. So I
mhm,
always want to make sure that to tell people, especially my clients, if you ever find that certain aspects of your religion are hurting you might want to revisit it.
mhm. So where, if you don't mind me asking, where does your family and the community that you grew up with sit with what you do today?
Well, first it was hard.
Yeah.
They did not. They were like, what are you doing? Like my mother, she was just like, why can't you just be a real doctor? She was like, can you be like a surgeon or something?
Oh, man. So
And
proud.
yeah, it was like, no.
Mhm,
She
mhm,
was like, I was like, no, this is it. But over the years, especially with my dissertation, I think that I was so surprised my mother actually helped me. My dissertation, I interviewed women who survived the earthquake in Haiti in
mhm,
2010.
mm,
And after that earthquake, I saw my community unravel. And I think that's when the discussion of mental health was serious
mm,
because for the first time, a lot of my family, my community, they saw people from Haiti saying, I'm suicidal. All I see is death. They didn't know what PTSD was, but someone was saying, I have nightmares, I have all these things. And then
mhm,
here I come with my dissertation, and I'm like, I'm going to interview these women and I'm going to hear the way they describe their symptoms and match it with PTSD. And
mm,
the way that they were describing it, like in Creole and in English, I matched it with the what our terms, our clinical terms for PTSD. And once my community, my family saw that, they were like, "Wow,
yeah,
that is so interesting." And from then, they've been so supportive, so supportive.
yeah. It's, it's funny to say it this way, but it's a silver lining of trauma, right? You tend to
Hmm.
grow beyond yourself and grow within your community, especially if you've experienced a communal trauma as large as
Yeah.
an earthquake. I do want to get more into that, but I want to go back for a moment. Does your family know of the childhood trauma that you just mentioned as far as the religion?
Not necessarily. They aren't aware, but I think they were trying to help. Just to go into it, and this is what really like propelled me to get to go into the mental health field. I was a child that suffered from anxiety when I was younger,
Hmm.
and perfectionism and all these other things and anxious thoughts that would just and I told the school psychologist, a version of myself back in the day, and that person called my mom and she said, she could really benefit from A, B, and C. And my mother said, "No, we're good.
Hmm.
Thanks so much." But I got
Yeah.
a priest, and then I went to this priest, and I was like, "Yeah, I have anxiety and this and that." He's like, "You don't have anxiety. What is this? There's demons. Whatever, the devil. The devil's trying to talk to you, blah, blah, blah." And then,
Wow.
he put his hand over my head and was just like, something, somebody be gone. I don't remember, but I just remember falling to the ground and then saying to myself, what just happened? And the anxiety only really got worse. And that to me is story. And I think that has happened to a lot of kids, a lot of the clients I treat, like they've gone for help. Priests have said whatever they've said, and then we've only continued to struggle. So they don't. But in my mother, I don't blame her, and I feel like she doesn't see it as trauma. She just sees it as, well, God has helped me. That priest has helped me. So why wouldn't he help you? So
Hmm.
I don't even. It's really because she didn't really have the resources, and she didn't really have someone to say, "Hey, like you can pray to God and see your priest and see a therapist too, and they can work together."
Right. Right. Whoever, was her community growing up,
Hmm.
she's working with what she knows, right? Um,
Exactly.
yeah. And thank you for sharing. I think that on this show, it happens a lot where either I or the person I'm interviewing shares a part of their story that is traumatic. And I just always feel it's important to say that the words may sound like they're coming out easily now, but
Yeah.
as you're talking, like I felt emotion in my body, like just picturing a small child, like trying to explain what she's feeling and being
Yeah.
dismissed. Or, I mean, how did you feel? What were your immediate emotions or reactions to that situation? Because I can imagine it could be pretty scary, actually.
Oh my gosh, my immediate reaction, because this was a very passionate priest where he pushed, I don't know
Oh
if you
my
ever seen those
gosh.
YouTube videos where they go like, "There," and the person
Yeah.
falls to the ground, and if they're like, "Oh, I can see," or,
Wow.
something like that.
Yeah.
So he's a very exaggerated priest, and when he did that, my immediate thought was, "He touched my forehead, I just wanna clean my head," because 'cause I'm
Yeah.
an anxious girl who's scared of
Oh,
germs.
yeah.
So
Oh,
I was just I only felt more anxious because 'cause I'm on the ground, and people are
oh.
just like, you're healed, it's
Wow.
great," and I was like, "I just wanna get up and cry,"
Yeah.
because this was, like, the worst. But I understand what you're saying. It's not necessarily traumatic to me. I really define it as, and it was traumatic for me as a child, but I've been able to heal from that. But I really look at it as like it changed my life. Like that is my whole mission,
Mhm.
explaining to parents what mental health is, and also just understanding like if they have a religious background, that I will definitely work with them. And throughout my career, I've collaborated with a lot of priests, with a lot of pastors, and I've gone to churches and I've said, hey, like, I believe in God too. Mental health is key, this and that. So it really was a defining moment in my life. And I've been blessed to say that I've worked with so many churches, and I'm so glad with the work I've done.
Yeah, that's awesome. That's really great to hear. Um, all right, so I want to so going back now to your dissertation, can you share some of the um just I know I'm sure it was like it's a huge topic, but some of perhaps the main, takeaways of that experience and what you learned about the experience of those women?
I mean, it just confirmed everything that I was already thinking. I went with the hypothesis that they're not expressing their symptoms in a way that a psychologist that doesn't have my background would understand.
Mhm.
Like they describe their symptoms as like, like my head hurts and my stomach hurts. Like everything was very physical and somatic. And I feel like I'm losing my mind.
Mm,
And but the part that surprised me, and I actually titled my dissertation Forever Marked, was again that there was this interesting religious piece where the women were saying, God has punished us and we are forever tainted, and there's no
mm,
way that we're ever going to recover from this. I will
wow,
forever be tainted by this experience. And it was almost like they couldn't blame God, but they couldn't reconcile their relationship with God. So they were just saying, like, it was almost like they felt very helpless.
wow.
And it's like, I will never be the same. And there's no changing that. And they had significant PTSD, especially the women who were saying, I'm forever marked and tainted by experience. Some they're saying there, I'm damaged goods
Mm,
and there's no recovery.
mhm.
So there was a bit of depression too with that mindset. And there was almost no hope.
Oh, it's
It was
heartbreaking.
very sad to see, very
Yeah,
sad to hear.
yeah. Why and I applaud it, but I'm curious your thoughts. Why focus in particularly on women?
I focused mainly on women because of the statistics that women were twice as likely to have PTSD or to have depression as compared to men based on previous data. But if I had to do it again, I would definitely want to interview men
Yeah.
to if I had a lot more money and a bigger bigger research platform, I definitely would have interviewed everyone. But at that time, it was only women, focusing on women, because for a multitude of reasons, women sometimes are hit harder by those traumatic experiences. Not saying that men don't experience PTSD,
Right.
but women have a bunch of other issues
Okay.
that just exacerbate it.
Okay. I can assume what they are, but do you mind
Mhm.
sharing what they are, their reasons?
Well, yeah, I mean, it could be like motherhood. Like
Yeah.
there's a weight. Not saying that some dads will not experience that. Women, for example, if they experience a tragedy, they're worrying about themselves and they're also worrying about their kids,
Right.
to the point where they'll often put their kids first, their kids' mental health, physical health first before their own. So
Mhm.
they're neglecting their own needs while they're experiencing trauma. So that's one example.
Mhm.
And sometimes women are less likely to reach out for help
Mm.
because they're just like, I got to do it all. I have to help. I have to be strong,
Yeah.
especially some women who are just like, they have to wear that superwoman cape and they'll mask it
Mhm.
because they don't want to look weak. or they don't want to be vulnerable in front of their children. So there's a lot of masking that goes on too.
Yeah. Yeah, I think we see that across the board with moms.
Hmm.
And but I also what was coming to mind as you were talking is, I've had other conversations on this show about, the strong Black woman in
Yeah.
particular. And, I it's coming to mind, the name in particular is sticking out is Dr. Holly Sawyer. There are a few women I've interviewed on the show that have said, like, that stereotype and that, pressure is what put me in this field because I need to end that. I need
Yeah.
Black women in particular to know that we do not always have to be strong, that, I don't want to keep putting words in their mouth. And
Hmm.
I'll link the episodes for anyone who wants to go back and listen. But how do you feel about that? I mean, is that something that you saw in that situation, beyond that situation? Like, I don't know. What are your thoughts as that came to mind
I've
as I was
seen it.
talking?
I've seen it when I was growing up, my dissertation, and even with the clients that I have now, because I do treat Black women. And I'm working so hard to break that mindset because, and I explained this to one of my clients who was like a light bulb. I
Mm,
said, can you imagine what this is doing to your son? Your son is seeing a Black woman work hard and smile through it all, and you're not being vulnerable. So when he goes to date a woman, that is the expectation,
yeah.
that you have to work and put a smile. And what's so interesting is, as I was talking to my husband, he was actually like, "Oh my God, you're right." Like sometimes I would look at, because I am very all about self care, and we had such an honest conversation where he was just like, "Sometimes I would look at you lay on the couch and be like, why isn't she doing anything?" And we had that vulnerable moment where he was like, "It's because I saw my mom come home from work, pick up the slack, do all these things to pick up the slack of his father, and he was just like, "I can't believe that I kind of put that on you." And
Mhm.
I was just like, "Yeah, like this is happening to Black women in relationships. It's very hard to date because men have this idea in their heads that's just like, well, you shouldn't be complaining because
Yeah.
my mother did this and she was a single mom and she had 3 kids, so you can do this too."
Yeah.
And it's hard for us to show up at work because we have to be strong Black women at work, and then we have to be strong Black women at home. So we again leading to why depression and PTSD rates are so high for
Mhm.
women.
Mhm. Mhm. Are there other ways that you help your clients break through that mindset? I mean, I think like bringing up the connection to the woman's kids
Mm.
is probably, I would imagine, the hardest hitting one just as a mom, but are there other ways that you work with your clients to sort of help break that cycle?
Yeah, we do a lot of generational work where, like, it's not about the future talk, but it's also just about going backwards. Like, what did you see your mom do? What did you see your grandmother do?
Mm,
And like, how do you think that affected them? And
yeah.
sometimes I even have them ask their mother and their grandmother questions.
Mhm.
And they're just so surprised. They're like, I didn't know my mother went through this. I didn't know my mother cried every single night. And I sometimes will have family sessions where I'm telling their mother, like, you need to be very vulnerable in this moment with your child because they had no idea what you were going through. And now we're going to help heal.
Yeah.
So I do a lot of generational work, and it's beautiful to see
Yeah.
how people are just like, I didn't know
Yeah.
that you went through all that and I'm sorry.
Yeah. Yeah. I mean, not knowing that your parent, in particular your mom, is going through something is deep, right? And then I think even about my own experience, it's like just the way you process things as a kid is so different, right? Like, just something as
Yeah,
simple that comes to mind a lot right now is the whole idea of the holidays, right? Like, as a
yeah,
kid, I love the holidays. My house was decorated really cute and fun, and I can picture my mom going out and doing the shopping and the cooking and all of that. And like, now as an adult, the mom, I'm going, this is BS that we have to do all of this. Like, this is
yeah.
not fun. And I'll say to my mom, like, what? And she goes, yeah, it sucked a lot of the time, but as a kid, you don't see that. You don't
Right.
know that, you don't recognize it. You just know how it's impacting you, and that's all you care about. And what you get as a kid, not in all situations, just in the example I'm talking about, I saw a decorated house, a couple of presents under the tree, and a dinner on Christmas Eve. What I didn't see how stressed out my mom was and all of that.
Mhm.
Like, and you can take
Mhm.
that and apply it to things that are obviously much more traumatic and deeper, but it's just
Yeah.
at every level, we just don't, I don't know. I think it's just so important to reflect, because as a kid, right, we don't, I don't know that we really want kids knowing the depth, right? Like, they should just enjoy their
Yeah.
childhood,
Most parents will not, but I actually argue the opposite. I'm just like, don't put on a show for your kids.
Mm,
Because they can handle it. They
yeah.
all they do is watch TV shows of characters. They reading books about characters and watching shows where the characters go through something hard and difficult.
Mm,
And that's how they learn. So
mm,
if they also see you going through something hard and difficult, you say, you know what, mommy's having a hard time right now. So I'm just gonna take some deep breaths. Can you
yeah.
join me?
Yeah.
It also empowers your child to be like, wow, like I can help my mom too. Like, let me see what I can do. I mean, there is a balance because sometimes you don't want to put everything on your child. Like
Right. Like, age
sometimes you don't want to,
appropriate.
yeah, you don't want to parentify your child, and then they end up being the mother and like, mom, like, what are you doing? Get up from bed. Like,
Yeah.
it's more so like if you're crying and you're trying to hide your tears from your child, that to me, you can just have an open moment. Kids wanna help you. I would say
Yeah.
your kid, all you do is help your child all day long. You don't think one moment of the day that they wanna say, "Hey, mom, like, I can cheer you up. Here's a dance."
Yeah. 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 Last night during bedtime, my kids that are almost 5 and almost 3, I was Dr. G, I was losing it. I was like
Mhm.
done with these kids and done with the bedtime routine. And I
Mhm.
was like, I was seeing red. And they hit me, the two of them, with, Mommy, you take a deep breath, breathe in, breathe out. And I was like, okay, you are so right. And we sat there and we did deep breaths. And then my daughter, who's the older one, like rubbed my back because I was lying on the floor, and she was like, "Do you feel better?" And I was like, "Oh my God.
You have
Thank
such
you
great
so
kids.
much."
Oh, that's so
Yeah.
sweet.
Yeah, it was a thing. At first I was like, "Excuse me, I need a deep breath." Like, if you just did the 45 things I asked you to do the first time, I wouldn't need to take a deep breath. But then I quickly moved on to, okay, they're hearing me. They're hearing their teachers, who clearly are,
Yeah,
doing this type of thing with them, and I was so grateful for
but
that.
that makes them feel good. She
Yeah,
probably felt so good, like, "I did that, like, I made my
totally.
feel good."
Totally. Um All right. So you mentioned it before. I mean, self-care is a big topic on the show.
Yeah.
How do you personally take care of yourself?
For me, it's intentional. Like every day, I do something that is, and I describe self care as balance. Like if I'm feeling unbalanced in one area of my life, I'm just like, how do I balance it right now in this moment? Exercise is a big thing for me. I don't really look at it as like for weight loss or for anything like that or like strength. I look at it as like that's a release because that's exactly what's going on. You're releasing all these endorphins to help make you feel better. So
Mm,
whenever I go to work out, my first instinct is, okay, so what do I need to let go of right now for this workout? What do I need to push myself to do? And I visualize myself and everything that makes me feel better. And I always set aside days where I'm just like, I'm going to be completely present with my husband or with my dog, with my family. So I have self care days, but they're not necessarily with me going to the spa or like doing whatever. It's about being intentional to get more of what I need. Because
mm,
we spend so much of our day at work or with other people or coworkers, or just doing things that aren't related to family. So I'm always just like, what do I need more of this week? I didn't spend enough time with my husband, so let's go for a date night. I didn't spend enough time with my dog, so let me walk her right now and just play with her. So it's all about like, how do I achieve balance right now? Because right now my life might be unbalanced and tipping more to something that I put a lot of energy into. So now I have to tip the scales back to me.
mhm, mhm. And what I heard through that is an incredible amount of self-awareness. How do
you either advise your clients or even with yourself, you know, how do you work to even be aware enough that you're imbalanced?
I think it shows in your actions. Like some people will say that I've been crying a lot, that I've been feeling anxious, that I've been feeling sad. And I'm always just like, that right there is key. If there's a
Mm,
lot of thoughts that you're having, if there's a lot of feelings that you're having that are making you feel good, then that you have to be really attuned to your body. The problem is most people don't listen to their body.
mhm,
They are so like, I'm going to work through it. I'm going to ignore it. I'm going to distract myself. I'm going to drink. I'm going to like go party, go eat. So most people are actually ignoring it.
mm.
So what I tell people to do, and it's very uncomfortable, is to sit with themselves and to really sit and feel those feelings. Because if you think about it, most of the time we don't want to. If
Right.
we actually sat with our feelings, we would really, for some people, they would really hate it because they would be like, I don't want to think about these things. I don't want to feel these difficult feelings and feel what I might need, but it's really necessary.
Yeah.
So sometimes I'll even tell people like, you need to schedule a cry session. Put it on your planner. There's a lot of things on your planner. I want you to schedule, I will cry at 5 p.m. And then I'm like, it sounds ridiculous, but you sometimes need to just pencil in those moments where you need to be like, I need to really understand what I'm going through. So I
Mhm,
have to increase their self awareness as to what it is that they're really missing.
mhm. What do you see as some of the main challenges or barriers to, let's go particularly to women,
Mhm.
in making that happen for themselves?
Probably one of the biggest barriers, unfortunately, is our children. Usually, it's like everyone's schedule is crazy, and I'll always hear this. My kid has this soccer, they got this going on. I have to help them with their homework. So
Mhm,
most of the time, when I ask them, "Have you taken care of yourself this week?" the first thing they'll say is, "Well, you know what? Like I had to do this. He had to go to there. He had to go here." And I'm always very cautious about saying this. I'm just like, you don't want to lose your identity
mm,
because just know that yes, you are a mom. That's not everything about you, is it?
right.
Because most people take that identity like I'm a mom and that's who I am. And then I work with women who have children in college and it's very hard for them
Mhm,
because they're literally like there's empty nest syndrome, but there's something else for women specifically who have poured so much into their role that they lose their identity once there's no one in the house.
yeah,
It's like, what do I want? What do I actually want to do right now? I don't have to go to soccer. People think that you'd feel relief, but a lot of women don't.
yeah,
A lot of women do not feel relief when the kids are at the house. It's not the big party that they say it is.
right.
So then you'll have moms just showing up at the college campus and it's just like, what are you doing? What's
It's
happening? Can I
me.
help you?
Yeah. Yeah. Yeah.
And it's
Yeah.
just like, it's not helicopter parenting. It's like, that's what their role has been for
Yeah.
18 years. I don't like the phrase, I don't really like that phrase, but it's just like, if you're so used to solving problems, when there's no problem to solve, you're just like, I need something.
Yeah.
So self care is so important for your identity.
Yeah. Yeah. I appreciate you saying that mostly because I sway the opposite way. Like in the sense that I feel like I lost myself almost immediately in motherhood.
Mhm.
And I've noticed that, just grossly generalized, I feel like there is a community of women who relate to me and
Mhm.
feel like motherhood hit them like a Mack truck and they're
Yeah.
just like, who am I? What do
Mhm.
I care about? This is nothing like I thought it would be. Oh my God, I'm just in crisis and need to figure out who I am. And then you have women who are on the opposite end of the spectrum. And I say that word, intentionally, it is a spectrum, right?
Mhm.
But you then the opposite end is women who feel so fulfilled by motherhood and
Yeah.
find themselves in motherhood. And
Mhm.
I so appreciate you saying that because it's like I often look at that end of the spectrum and be like, and be a little jealous and
Mhm.
envious and have to catch myself when I feel
the thoughts coming of, well, what's wrong with me? Why don't I feel like motherhood is the be all end all? And it's like, okay, you know what? I'm going through it now. I'm on the self-development path now. I'm hit by
Yep.
the Mack truck now. And come my kids, the last one turning 18, I will have hopefully built this show, done all the
Mhm.
things, and then it'll be go time, right? And so I'm like, okay, you know what? Like, it's such a petty, like, horrible way to think of it, but it like gives me some peace, that like
Mhm.
at some point or another, particularly in motherhood, we're all gonna have to figure out who the heck we are and balance it
Absolutely.
with these kids. Like, it's intense.
Yeah. Well, you bring up a really great point. Sometimes it does happen a lot earlier. Like a lot of women will feel guilty. They be like, I don't feel this way. Like I'm struggling. I'm
Yeah.
drowning. Like, what is my role? I they say I'm only being called mom. Like if there's something to not hearing your name every day.
Yeah.
Right?
Yeah.
Like there's something to someone saying, Mom, 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 mom,
Yeah.
mom.
Yeah.
But sometimes you're like, "Where's but my name? Like, who am" like, there's that struggle, that identity when someone does talk to you in an adult way, you're just like, "Excuse me?"
Yeah.
Like,
Yeah.
how do I respond to this?
Yeah. Yeah, and then, like, innocently, and I've never taken issue with it, but just hearing you say that, like, then all of a sudden, even my husband started calling me mama, and I'm like, "Mm." I never heard it a certain way, but that is immediately what I thought of. It's like I'm babe, mama, mommy. Like, that's it. It's really kind of interesting, actually, when you think of it that way.
Yeah, you have to tell your husband, like, "Look, I need you to say my name at least once a week now, or once a day. You can't
Mhm.
I don't wanna lose myself here."
Mhm, mhm, mhm. Yeah. Yeah, totally. Okay. All right. So to work with you, Dr. T, you offer therapy,
Mhm.
consulting. You also have, I saw on your website, the growth method. Can you talk to me a little bit about what that is?
Yeah, absolutely. So it's in the developing stages, but on both ends. So I developed a growth method for therapy because I want to be more holistic about the way they were assessing people. Because I assess kids for ADHD, autism, and learning disabilities. And
Okay.
I was saying to myself that we need a more comprehensive way of looking at kids rather than saying, oh, you have behavioral issues
Mhm.
and this is that. And then that's it. So
Yeah.
just to go through it, goals is for it's an acronym. So
Uh-huh.
goals, some people are very blindsided. It's just like, well, what do you want with this diagnosis? What are your goals?
Mm,
It could seem very aimless to just be like, I just want ADHD. And for what? Like, where are we going with this? How is this going to help you?
mm,
So, part of my first part of the treatment is let's figure out what we're going to do with the information that we get when we get it.
mhm,
Then I assess for relationships because that's a big part of mental health. Your social support, people don't realize that. Sometimes a lot of what contributes to depression and anxiety is feeling alone.
mm,
So then it's just either about how do we get you more support or how do we help you set boundaries? How do we help you reestablish, repair relationships with your family? That's that generational piece. Then
mhm,
we have the observation where we increase your insight. How can I make you more aware, just like that self care? How can I make you more aware of the imbalance in your life? And then we do a wellness assessment. I assess for sleep, eating habits, physical activity, spiritual wellness. How's your relationship with God, career, financial wellness? All these different aspects affect your mental health. And most of the time, when I do a wellness assessment, I will usually see such a bigger, broader picture that helps me understand the diagnosis.
mm,
And then I do a trauma assessment because there's so many things that overlap with PTSD and trauma. Like, is it ADHD or is it trauma? And there's
mm.
been so many times where I've stopped people from saying ADHD and said, this person has PTSD. Because like we go through all these things, it's like, and
Mhm,
they're like, I thought ADHD is this whole life. No, you didn't.
mhm,
You actually have PTSD. A lot of things that you're going through right now are overlapping ADHD, but it's more so PTSD. And
mhm,
the last piece is habits. How do we change your habits? How what are some of the habits that are affecting your mental health? And then what can we do to resolve them? And I'm trying to adapt the growth method for employee wellness because I'm all about liberating people from hostile work environments or helping them set boundaries if they do really like their job, but they really just need to work on their role. So I'm working on consulting with companies and schools just so that they can help their employees be their best selves.
Very cool. Yeah, I think this is a great time for it too, because I feel
Hmm.
like the workforce is going through a massive just overhaul,
Yeah, they
right?
need a big shift. There's a
Yeah.
big with the great resignation. So
Hmm.
people, I think a lot of companies would benefit from just having a way. How do you structure a company in a way that's humanistic, but also can help you be efficient? And I think too many companies treat people like robots now. Like you gotta work, you gotta do this, you gotta catch up.
Yeah.
But it's actually affecting their mental health.
Yeah. Well, and I think generally, at least what I'm seeing on social media, the employees have less tolerance for that attitude now,
Yeah.
right? Like people are
Yeah.
like, no, sorry, no, not going to work until 3 a.m. and get up at 6 a.m. and do it again. Like
Yeah.
in some fields, right? Like it's not a perfect thing, but I think that the um the pandemic really showed people a different side of what their work life balance could be like.
It sure did. And now people are demanding more boundaries, but
Hmm.
jobs are just like boundaries. We didn't have boundaries. Like, what does that mean?
Yeah.
So a lot of jobs are struggling.
Yeah. Well, right, and that touches on the generational aspect too, right? Like you
Mhm.
still have a lot of leadership as part of, an older generation that just
Yeah.
knows one way of doing things. And then you have, I don't know, millennials, Gen Zers coming in and being like, I'm going to sign an email with peace out, don't call me. I mean, like just
Yep.
totally different, right?
Or ghosting
Um,
their employees and saying,
yeah.
I don't like this. I'm gone.
Yeah, yeah. So now when you talk about bringing this method into schools, are you talking about with staff or with students?
With staff, I feel like the greatest intervention with schools is not just targeting the kids, but just targeting the staff. I've been a
Yeah.
burnt out employee before. It's very hard to do your work if you're burnt out and you're suffering from compassion fatigue.
Mm,
And we're seeing that a lot with schools. A lot of schools, teachers are leaving in droves. They're
yeah,
just not taking it anymore. And we need teachers. I don't think people realize that there's a big crisis on our hands.
yeah,
If we don't have anybody to teach our kids, what are we really doing?
yeah. No, it's yeah. I'm just entering, school aged kids and
Mhm.
but I already see it. I mean, in some of the there was a daycare school, whatever, that we were involved in a year ago or so, and couldn't get staff. Like we had to keep our kids home a couple of days because they just legally couldn't hit
Oh,
the
wow.
requirement for the ratios because staff was either, this was back when, you still had a quarantine for 10
Mhm.
days to 2 weeks and staff members were getting COVID. And then other people were leaving because their kids had to be home so often that they couldn't work and take care of it. Like it's just
Oh my goodness.
wild, the pressure, I think, particularly on teachers right now. And compassion fatigue, that's I've heard a lot about over the last few years decision fatigue, but I've not heard compassion fatigue. Can you share a little bit more about what that is?
Absolutely. Compassion fatigue, you see that a lot in the helping professions like teachers, nurses, psychologists, social workers. You get to a point where like you're pouring so much energy and time into helping people and advocating for themselves, but there's a sense of helplessness because you're encountering the same situations over and over and over again.
Hmm.
And it's almost like you're just like, I'm burnt out from helping people all the time. But sometimes those people aren't ready to accept my help. So
Mm,
you put a lot more in. It's almost like it's direct. So just as an example, if someone's not following your treatment plan, you're working harder than your patient
mm,
to
yeah.
get them to follow it instead of setting the boundary and holding them accountable. So
Mm,
oftentimes helpers, you'll see this a lot with nurses, doctors, and police officers, firefighters, they're doing so much for the community and then they start to feel resentment like you'll never get better. You want to be like this. You'll
what's the
have like
point?
negative. It's yeah. What is the point? You must feel disillusioned with your profession. Just like nobody ever gets better. It's all helpless. Like
Mm,
nobody wants it because you're seeing the same type of cases where you're putting a lot more of yourself.
mm.
You're tired of being compassionate.
Yeah. And I think just, I'm not a teacher, I'm not in that state, but I don't think anyone gets to that point and feels good about it. Like, you get to that point
Yeah.
and you feel awful, like, "This is my life's work, this is what I've dedicated my life to, and now I feel terrible about it." Like, that's gotta be an awful feeling.
Yeah, you feel incredibly guilty. I mean, I felt that there was one year that was really bad, like my caseload. I was working harder than the parents and wondering why. I was almost trying to rush them through it. Usually my response was to be take it slow. But for
Mm,
this particular year, for some reason, I just felt like I gotta save them all. I gotta do this. I gotta help these people. I gotta help these parents. And they just weren't ready to hear it.
yeah,
And I was just so like, we gotta do this. We gotta get your son help. We gotta do, and I wasn't taking a step back and just honoring that process.
yeah,
And I felt completely burnt out, compassion fatigue. I was crying all the time. I just like, why won't they listen to me? Why won't they
oh,
help their kids?
yeah,
And I had
yeah.
to, my own therapist had to reel me back in and be like, listen, people work on their own time.
Right, you
You need
know
to
this, yeah.
slow down.
Yeah, 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 yeah. Take some of your own medicine, Dr. T.
Yeah,
Yeah,
exactly. She was like, "You need to, like, rein it
yeah,
in," and that helped immensely, like, once we had a few sessions and she reminded me of that, that's when my students started to get better because
mm,
I wasn't rushing them.
yeah. You were in a school, you were the counselor in the school or
I was a psychologist in school, yeah.
psychologist in school?
Mhm.
And were you the sole psychologist in the school?
No, there were a lot of us. I think it was like 15 other
Oh,
psychologists. Yeah, because
oh,
it was a
wow.
special education.
Got it.
Like it
Okay,
was a very intense setting, so there
okay.
had to be a lot more support. But
Got it.
I
Okay,
wasn't.
because yeah, because I'm getting at how, you know, that resource is completely lacking in schools. You
Yeah,
have one counselor for 500 kids. It's like, how can they possibly be expected to
yeah, and that's
handle that?
sometimes like a better rate. Like there's a lot of people that are like 1 to 1100, 1 to 1200.
Oh
Like
my
there's some
god.
really bad ratios. I mean, 1 to 500 for some people is considered manageable, but
Wow.
there's some really bad ratios out there right now that really need to be resolved. Which again result in compassion fatigue because
Yeah.
you would want to save them all and you can't.
Yeah. Do you think that horrible ratio that we're talking about, is that because of a lack of counselors or because there's a lack of funds put towards that resource?
I don't think there's a lack of counselors, but I think there's just a lack of the no one wants to put in the money for it, I think.
Yeah, it's
I
almost
think
like
that
no one respects it.
no one respects it because there are counselors that are ready to work, but will actually leave those jobs because they're just like, I need help and you're not giving me help.
Mm,
And it's just like, no, we can't afford another person right now. We can't afford another you.
yeah,
So you're just gonna have to deal with it. So they end up leaving and then giving it to somebody else. So I think that they really need to work on their ratios and hire people, but also you don't realize if you just give people what they need, they'll stay and they'll
yeah.
do really good work.
Mind-blowing concept.
I just invest and
Yeah,
spend the money and you'll see it works. It gets better. But instead it's just like, no, let's give you limited resources. Let's give you as little support as possible and let's see how you do.
yeah, yeah, yeah. Send them out to the front line. Are
Yeah.
you How long ago were you in that role?
Other than that, I actually left in March of 2021.
Oh, okay, so
So yeah,
not too long ago.
not too long ago. But again, it was I'll tell you what happened. I was just a little crazy. They were saying, "Well, we're gonna fire you or deny you tenure or fire you because you took too many sick days." And I was just like, "What?"
In a
I was
COVID
so
world?
confused. Yeah, in a COVID world, and I was like, over the course of my career, my 4 year career at that school, I was shocked because I was like, because I still had it was so crazy. I still had 15 sick days left in my bank in my sick. So I was like, "What?" I'm
I don't get it.
confused.
Yeah.
I wasn't taking vacations out to Miami.
Right.
Like they were just like, no, like, and I was like deeply confused and deeply hurt because
Yeah.
it was like, so, but these are the type of things that we encounter in the schools. It's so insensitive.
Yeah. So I don't get it. I don't get it. You don't get it either. But like you had sick days left and this is it. Like to me that sounds like a lawsuit waiting to happen. Like
I,
you have certain days they're supposed to be used, right? Like I don't
well,
know. That's
apparently, I'm not supposed to take. And I'll never forget this. Literally, someone from my union was like, "You have sick days, but you're not supposed to take them."
yeah. I
And
have heard that before too, yeah.
I was like, "But legally, I'm entitled to sick days." She goes, "Yes, legally, but hush, hush,
All right.
not really." And I was
Yeah.
like, "So I'm leaving
Yeah, that's
because
awful.
that makes no sense to me."
Yeah. Yeah, that's absolutely awful. I initially asked how long ago you were in that role because I wanted to ask, your thoughts on, just being someone with a lot of experience in
Mm,
assessing kids for learning disabilities and ADHD, autism, all the things. I hear, I don't know, but I hear that just the effect of the pandemic is so
yeah,
strong with kids right now. Like just thankfully, it's a collective thing, so in
yeah,
the sense that you don't have, like, some kids who experience the pandemic and some that don't, but it's, like, almost I know with the preschoolers who are turning 5, it's almost more like they're turning 4,
right,
and
yeah.
sorta just as a group, do you feel like what do I wanna ask about this? It's like, I sometimes wonder if there are actually more cases of ADHD, autism, fill in the blank, or is it that we are just more aware of it now?
I think it's a mix of both, but specifically after the pandemic, it's hard to tell. You would need like a really comprehensive psychological evaluation because the pandemic for a lot of kids they lost a year. Some kids
Yeah.
did not have internet, especially my kids did not have access to internet. So there'd be months or weeks that they would not log on, and then sometimes the internet was shaky. So they would log on like they'd probably have like 2 to 3 hours of a
Mm,
school day. So there was just like a year that or a year or two where kids just weren't really learning. And
yeah.
on top of that, there was immense grief. People don't really talk about like most kids, and I think the number was like at least 8 million kids have either lost a caregiver or a parent to the
Oh,
pandemic.
yeah.
And not just parents, like you could have also lost your grandmother, you could have
Right.
also lost your cousin, you could have also lost someone really close to you, your sibling. And a lot of kids did not process that. They didn't process the grief. So them not being able to attend might be like, I'm worried about my mom. Like my father, my grandfather passed away due to COVID, and they're in school. Like what's gonna happen? I don't know what's going on. Or when
Mm,
someone sneezes, they're like don't get me
scared.
sick because I don't want to get my
Yeah.
parents sick. So there's just so many things. There's so many factors that we have to really assess before we say ADHD, especially after the pandemic.
Yeah. Yeah, and I remember, like, my daughter was 2 going on 3, and my son was just born in 2020, and so I remember initially thinking, "Oh, thank goodness my kids are young enough, they won't remember this." This was before I knew it was gonna go on for
Mhm.
years, right?
Yeah,
And it ended up very deeply impacting both of them, and I see the effects of it still
yeah,
now. My son is clingy and just attached to me, and it's like because he only knew me for the first year of his life, me and my
absolutely.
husband, but, um, my daughter just my daughter had, like, the kind of for her, the double whammy of a new sibling and her world shutting down all within a 2-week period, and so it just I see it now just in her social
Yeah,
skills that she's still building because that whole year
yeah, yeah.
is gone. The other thing that, um,
I think has come out of the pandemic and in relation to, being difficult to assess for things
Mhm,
is is that in such a positive way, I think mental health is having a big moment on social media. On the
mhm,
other hand, I mean, even me, I have a therapist and a psychiatrist, and I still see videos on TikTok and Reels and all the things where someone is like, "Hey, these 5 things are symptoms of ADHD." And then the next one will be, "And these 5 things could be, a trauma response." And I'm looking at it like, "Huh, like, do I have ADHD? Like, are these like, it's so overwhelming at times,
I know, yeah.
and it almost ugh, it
TikTok is annoying.
oh my god, it's like,
Like, yeah, it is. It's so I find that, like, I'll have people look I saw this TikTok, and I'm like, "Please, just
"Oh,
please." It is sometimes it can be good, sometimes you get good videos, but there's a lot of misinformation, and it's now that after the pandemic, it's fun to talk about mental health. So now everybody wants to be a mental health expert. And
mhm,
I'm also noticing that a lot of people who are in therapy for years be like, I've been in therapy for years, so therefore I can tell you about this one thing because then they're repeating what their therapist says, but it's just
right,
like it doesn't make you an expert that you've been in but you've been in therapy for years. It just means that you're working on yourself. So
right,
I feel like some people now feel entitled to speak up mental health because of their experience in therapy, but and then also just a little bit problematic to discuss like this is what I learned in therapy, so this is what also going to apply to you. When
yeah,
therapy is a very unique process for everyone.
yeah, yeah." I mean, I'm with you. I see I see so many benefits, especially because, so many people don't have access to therapy,
Yeah.
whether it be financial or insurance or time or, resources available. We just had a whole conversation on how you sometimes have one school counselor for 1,500 kids. And so
Hmm.
I think there is such a place for it as far as someone being able to get on a free app and see something that makes them feel good or makes them feel seen or goes or gives them an
Yeah.
idea that says, "Oh, maybe I do need to seek out professional help." But
Right.
I just speaking solely from my own experience, it's like I have the professionals and we are working together. And then I
Yeah.
see a 15-second, short form video and I'm like questioning like
Yeah, I
everything
know, I know.
about
That's why I
myself.
always tell people just follow therapists
Yeah.
because we a lot of therapists after the pandemic are now getting on, especially me, I'm getting on TikTok and just kind of dispelling those myths. So I would say just follow therapists
Yeah.
more so than following other people who are just like, this is ADHD because I have ADHD, so maybe you have ADHD.
Yeah. 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 And I feel the need to clarify in this moment. I'm not a therapist, but I interview them. So you can follow me.
Yeah, exactly. So you're the perfect
Then
platform.
yeah, okay, all right. Like I'm not trying to tell you what ADHD is. I'm asking the professionals to tell us what
Mhm.
ADHD is. So, oh my goodness. Anyway, Dr. T, is there anything, in relation to what we've talked about that you would want to make sure to say today or something that's lingering on your heart, your mind, your soul that you want to make sure to say and leave people with today?
Yeah, just speaking speaking on a lot of things social media still, I've been seeing a lot of things about seasonal depression.
Mm,
So, which is very real. It is darker out, so people tend to be unhappier, but also just being aware that it's holidays.
mhm,
Holidays happen during the season. It's also very stressful. So my what I want to leave people with is just to take time to honor your grief
mm,
if you do have grief, if you did lose someone to COVID or just lost someone recently during the holiday season, like that can also add to the holiday blues. And it's especially during this time, take care of yourself and focus on self care because we are overwhelmed
yeah,
during the holiday, more so overwhelmed in the holiday season. Not necessarily because it's a seasonal depression, but also just because this is the time where we tend to be the busiest
yeah,
and we put the most pressure on ourselves as we get ready for the new year. So really, really take the time to take care of yourself from
yeah.
now into the spring.
Yeah. Yeah. Thank you for saying that. I needed that reminder. I I caught myself having the thought yesterday in the car. I was like,
why couldn't, America have been discovered in like April or May, and then we'd have Thanksgiving in April or May,
Right?
and it wouldn't back right up to Christmas because it's like,
Yeah.
wow, like why do,
Thanksgiving would be really great in August.
oh my God, yeah, right?
Yeah, we'd have an outside picnic. We'd be all, we wouldn't be like huddled up with our jackets. We would
Yes.
just, yeah,
And
I
Christmas could
agree.
just be its standalone, Hanukkah, all the things, like, they could just
Yeah.
be their own deal instead of it being, like, Halloween, Thanksgiving, Christmas, like, couldn't we
Mhm.
have spaced it out a little bit?
I know. And New Year's Eve and New Year's and then Valentine's Day. It's like
Yes.
it's
And then I
nonstop.
say I say I joke in my family that we're just like a Q1 family because my daughter was born on New Year's Day. I'm January 13th. My anniversary is January 15th. My son's birthday is in February, and my husband's birthday is March. And so we just go from Halloween
Oh
to
no.
March, where we're like celebrating everything. Like, can
That's
we
a
not
lot.
celebrate something? And what usually ends up happening is we don't celebrate me because I'm like, no, I don't want to do it. Anyway, it's my little rant, and I'll
Well,
deal with it.
I
But
hope you have a good season in
I will.
Q1.
I know.
Yeah, just take care of yourself because that is a lot.
Yes, yes, yes. I know. Every year it gets better. I will say that. Every
Yeah,
year
good, good.
I manage it better and we deal better and I enjoy it more. So that is a positive. But anyway, Dr. T, thank you so much for your time and for being here. And this was a great conversation. I appreciate you.
Yes, thank you so much for having me.
Okay, lots to unpack here, huh? I think first of all, I want to thank Dr. T for the reminder that we all need, that we sometimes pour so much of ourselves into the different roles that we have, and we end up losing the part of our identity that matters to us most. It's so important to take a pause and remember that we are all more than mom, wife, daughter, whatever it is, and as we talked about on the show, that we actually have first names. Yeah, that's the thing. You've heard me talk on these past solo shows how this is especially difficult during the holiday season. There's a lot of pressure on our shoulders, but as I'm learning right along with you, it is so, so important. I also really appreciated Dr. T's take on religion and mental health. I mean, I think you heard me have a couple of whoa, never thought of it like that moments. As I mentioned on the show, I've lost touch with my religion over the years, and while there are many factors involved in the distance I've put there, how religion typically I see handles mental health is one aspect. And we just simply need more people like Dr. T who are able to bridge that gap. I don't know that it would bring me back to religion, but I think that it might be a start. And I think that there are a lot of people who are feeling that and want that gap filled. And so anyway, the communities that she is able to touch directly, I mean, wow, what a privilege to have such a resource on your side. And in this same line of thinking, I, of course, also want to thank Dr. T for sharing her story with anxiety and her experience that she shared of trauma growing up. I know that it must not have been easy, but it is so important, as always, to continue to normalize these conversations. All right, so please go check her out on social media and head over to her website to learn more about the growth method. That's all I've got. I've got to go. I will catch you next time. Bye.
Thank you so much for tuning in today. Sass Says is a production of Luann Nigara Inc. This podcast is meant to be educational and not meant to replace professional therapy or professional medical attention. To learn more about today's show and what's new in my world, head over to sasssays.com. Thanks so much. Talk later.